Welcome to Part 3 of Literary, Legal, and Civic. We will continue where we left off reviewing our legal institutions and then cover the overall health of civic institutions in our American society. Continuing on with the legal tower of primary institutions, we would like to discuss the last two on the list, democratic rights and constitutional rights and freedoms, neither of which we as free people should ever take for granted. To understand the institutional aspects of these freedoms and what we see happening today in our society, we need to first put some context in place. The context will be a summation of the issues we have just gone through in our legal institutional review, which has led us to develop distrust and divide amongst the leaders and general public across the nation. We are going to call out what we see as a fundamentally dangerous concern, which we assert is at the base of all these issues we're about to summarize. This fundamental concern we are alluding to feeds the issues and by consequences generates public division and distrust in our institutions of government, law, and national leadership. The fundamental concern is mainstream media bias, and we decidedly affirm it's directly endangering our freedoms. Mainstream media bias is not fiction, it's a fact, supported by research and the heavy evidence which demonstrates the charge. The general public in America, eagerly by some and reluctantly by others, acknowledges as a fact. The reasoning behind our assertion that mainstream media bias endangers our freedom is fully explained in Video 6F of our contemporary review for primary institutions in arts, music, and communications. For now, in this video segment, we will simply summarize our view. So let's lay out some context for our point of view, with a summary list of all the issues we've discussed so far under legal institutions. Distrust in national leadership, the Clinton corruptions, the G.W. Bush war in Iraq, the Obama scandals, distrust of those around Obama, state and local leadership corruption, distrust in the American political system, the dirty 2016 presidential election, the many Hillary scandals, the Clinton Foundation corruption, the Trump scandals, the media bias and collusion with Hillary, distrust in our judicial system of laws, courts, and enforcement, the Attorney General Eric Holder scandals, the Attorney General Loretta Lynch meeting with Bill Clinton, weak Obama leadership on war on drugs, marijuana recreational legalization, the opioid epidemic across the nation, over 200 sanctuary cities in defiance of law, loose border controls, illegal immigrant crime, liberal efforts to suffocate free expression and critical thinking, Obama squandering strategic focus off genuine national and international priorities, Obama's preoccupation with his legacy, transgender infatuation by liberals, the LGBTQ social engineering, out-of-control gender identity politics, and $149.9 trillion national debt. Altogether, these issues within our legal institutions provides a baseline context for explaining the cause of division and distrust and how such endangers our freedoms. For a moment, let's examine the issue a little deeper, especially in regards to our democratic freedoms and the relationship between an American free press and the general public, as this relationship is unique to our constitutional democracy. It's symbiotic and interconnected, and therefore important to all of us. A free press is instrumental in a genuine democracy, towards ensuring a constant vigilance upon the powers that be, or more easily said, our elected government, to scrutinize their words, to examine their intentions, to question their directions, and always to challenge their conduct. What do we mean by a symbiotic relationship between a free press and the general public's right to free speech, free thinking, and the pursuit of happiness? We simply mean one does not properly happen without the other, and if one side is out of balance, the entire relationship of mutuality is diminished, if not altogether lost. In a symbiotic relationship, each side relies upon the other to interact with common purpose and mutual benefit in order to achieve more for both sides than otherwise would be possible working alone. Let's go over how it works between a free press and media and the general public. We're going to speak about the symbiosis between the two with regards to information, analysis, and reporting. And we're going to explain how in current times this relationship is unbalanced if not broken, and then what that means to us in the public. First, a question to start us off. From where do you think most people get their information about issues, events, opportunities affecting their lives, politics, government, and so forth, in order to learn about and understand national issues of importance and things they may care about? Well, most immediately, it's from family and friends. Some get it through reading, some through schooling and education, and others get their information from religious affiliations at church or the synagogue or mosque. Some discuss issues in their civic associations, and others get their information through other people by word of mouth or casual conversations. While some people get their information from close associations, it represents less of a source of news than getting info from the daily news. The principal way people get information on issues, whether the issues are local, state, or national, is typically by way of the national mainstream media, newspapers, TV, cable, some magazines, and of course, social media and the internet. The majority of Americans get their information from mainstream media in the morning, afternoon, evening, and night, and for some, all day long on the internet. This access to the American public gives mainstream media significant influence across the spectrum of a national public audience, 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, all year long. Most people rely upon the news, especially those who are civic-minded and concerned about the country and issues affecting our society and the quality of our lives. They listen to and watch the news for what it can provide them, especially in explaining what's happening, when it's happening, and why it's happening. People are busy and have little time to examine issues closely, to delve into the complexity of subjects, so they tune into the news, in newspapers or TV, radio, or the internet. And as they do, many people are predisposed to trust what they're being told, trust it as factual and true, trust it as honest. And because many are starved for time or have other interests consuming their minds, they rely upon the news to do their critical thinking for them. So by default, people become dependent upon the news providers to condense the issues and analysis into easily digested sound bites and headlines. And generally, people have come to trust and accept those sound bites and headlines in the news articles as the truth. To the public, these news forms get accepted as the most accurate conclusions one can reach. Most, in fact, accept with little scrutiny or question what they're being told, right or wrong, true or not. They hear it or see it, read it, and repeat it, and thus they yield to the news media. And by choice, yielding extraordinary power and influence to sway how people should think and what they should believe within the society around them. Simply put, if the national media is unfairly biased, either conservative or liberal, America as a result is unfairly misdirected. Some would call it deceived or manipulated. The trust relationship between the public and their news source is key, as most people in America are honest and accepting, and the truth is what the American public expects and rightly deserves. If a media outlet wants to express opinion or a slant on an issue, they can express their opinion on their opinion page or commentary show. But with the news should be fully, accurately presenting the facts, the issues, the choices, without manipulation, without collusive behaviors, without ideological slant. Just the truth, and let the public decide. Misdirection by a biased media can lead people into one ideological persuasion or another, and people so misdirected may find themselves in a place and position they would not have chosen, had they been given the real facts and truth to start with, and that is the danger we face. As a result of the dishonesty inherent in media bias, the public mind in free thinking is corrupted. In turn, the basis for free expression of ideas, beliefs, and our fundamental rights to free speech is likewise corrupted, and therefore denied to us. In the end, a mainstream media which is biased represents a perversion to our right to a free press, a press which does not hold itself to a higher code of honor and trust with the general public. A press which is serving an ideological master is not a free press. And if our press is not free to provide us with accurate and trustworthy news upon which we frame our ideas and beliefs regarding issues of the day, then we are fraudulently denied our freedom to think and speak openly, and our democracy suffers. Now turning to our last institutional group, Civic, let's take a look at how community, neighborhood, and civic associations are faring. And then we'll take an even closer look at how the national cultural fabric of race relations is faring today, across America, especially in our large urban cities. How do you think community and civic organizations in your state, county, city, or town are doing these days? Traditionally, there have been and are many different types of organizations people are able to participate in. Some require formal membership, others casual. Typically, they're all active groups with a purpose, a social mission, and leadership. They largely exist to assist a community in its social development and its focus on people in need, to promote citizenship and civic-minded affairs, and personal character development, education, fundraising, charity, or the pursuit of noble ideals. Unfortunately, over the past few decades, many of these groups and organizations are finding it difficult to attract new members. Some organizations have seen their ranks dwindle, as younger people and adults have sought other forms of interest, or as the population broadens its diversity, and the economy has stressed people's time and money. As a result, many local, regional, and even national organizations are shrinking, or are struggling to survive and closing the doors as the surrounding culture no longer recognizes their relevancy. As the positive, more traditional groups are receding in membership and presence, groups which have always encouraged good and healthy values in their respective communities, the cultural fabric of the community takes a hit. Community leaders are fewer, and their focus diluted, and potential for positive influence is diminished. The community's persona is slowly grayed. As a result, and it's happening today at an increasing pace, urban decay is spreading. Schools and education are degrading and failing. Illegal drug use is widening and deepening into people's lives, enslaving and destroying families and friends. Gang membership is growing and setting once vibrant communities into a spiraling chaos of crime, drugs, and predation. And where were once safe and attractive urban centers and suburban cities and towns are now endangered with civil unrest, protesters, and a slow, relentless degradation of society. And relentlessly, the decaying hand of relative morality is slipping its web around our communities, large and small, across the country. Healthy and vital associations are collapsing or losing their traction and are receding. And in their place, vulgar and destructive groups have emerged and are filling the void. Not with character and positive values, mind you, but with their nature, anger, chaos, hate, and violence. Today, is your neighborhood a safe zone? Like many neighborhoods were back in the 50s, the 60s, 70s, and the 80s. Some would add the 90s, and just 10 years ago. How about race relations? Do you think they're better now, after 8 years of a black president and as a black attorney general and his black advisor, the Reverend Al Sharpton? Here's some facts to digest. America's worries about race relations are at a record high, as reported in early 2017 by Gallup. Just 3 years ago, in 2014, only 17% of Americans worried about race relations. Now 42% do, with a dramatic worsening during Obama's last few years in office. Tension in major urban centers are high and anti-established sentiments are profuse. Adding testimony to the negative effect Obama's presidency had on race relations, the New York Times reported in July of 2016, national race relations are at their lowest point in the Obama presidency. 69% of Americans say race relations are generally bad, one of the highest levels since the 1992 riots in Los Angeles during the Rodney King case. Past several years, Black America has become unhinged, reacting to shootings of young blacks in contentious circumstances involving self-defense, stand-your-ground laws, police reactions. A number of successive black young men are killed or severely wounded, and black communities in major urban areas rise in protest. Numerous fatal killings by police when arresting blacks, in some cases justified, in others under dubious circumstances, unites Black America along with many Hispanics and liberal white Americans in visible protest and civil strife. In Ferguson, riots erupt in August of 2014. President Obama and Eric Holder stick their nose into the fray, under the pretense of civil rights concerns for social justice, as though the state and local leaderships can't sort it out. An investigation by the Justice Department and FBI finds the young, arresting police officer, Darren Wilson, innocent of any inappropriate or illegal police action in the shooting of Michael Brown, essentially vindicating the police and revealing the empty rhetoric of race hustlers and professional agitators. The Black Lives Matter movement emerges, gathering emotionally wrought blacks and others into sympathetic bashing of men in blue, despairing police in raucous parades of protest in many cities, closing down highways, beating white, hapless motors who found themselves trapped in the chaos. A mob ruled of blind, infectious anger, overriding sanity and reason sets in, providing both opportunity and cover for professional agitators, anarchists, and thieves. Professor Daniel Nagin, a recipient of the prestigious Stockholm Prize on Criminology and an elected Fellow of the American Society of Criminology, and Teresa and H.J. Hines III, University Professor of Public Policy and Statistics, published a report in October of 2016 regarding the disproportionate targeting of minorities, particularly African Americans, by law enforcement agencies. He cites the facts of the research don't support the contention. In fact, he finds that whites are more often the recipients of lethal force than are blacks. Then the hysteria grows, and innocent police officers start getting assassinated. In New York City, December 2014, 2 policemen are brutally murdered in cold blood. The climate of hate, spurred by sensationalist media stories, spills innocent blood. It's now open season on our finest. The bloodshed of police is of no consequence to rabid race hustlers like Al Sharpton. He selfishly hijacks the opportunity to project his image and special interests, leading marches and parades, purposely diverting the issue away from black violence, disseminated family structure of the black home, and the convulsing black communities ripped by violence, economic depression, and social upheaval. Al Sharpton takes every opportunity to get into the cameras and behind the microphone, to seed his politics of hate, of division, of deception. Barack Obama invites him to the White House to advise and counsel the president on what he sees as the issues. To men on the outside, it's a blatant charade. Laughable if it wasn't so serious. The President of the United States seeking counsel from a liar, self-promoter, and a fake. Many Americans are disgusted with Obama for seeking such vile counsel. Then in April 2015, another young black man, a heroin dealer and thief, is arrested and dies in the back of a police van. The black community responds with violence and riots over several days. 6 officers involved in the arrest and transport of Freddie Gray, the black victim, are themselves charged by the city's lead prosecutor. And then about a year later, all charges are dropped, and the case concludes with 0 convictions against any of the 6 police officers. It seems, based on eyewitness testimony, Freddie Gray reputedly banged his head and back into the metal van while being transported. Then in Dallas, Texas, on July 7, 2016, a disgruntled black sniper opens fire on 12 policemen and 2 civilians with a high-powered rifle. 5 officers are killed. 10 days later, on July 17, 2016, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, another ambush occurs, with black shooters killing 3 policemen and wounding several others. It seems the Black Lives Matter's taunt of pigs in a blanket is foretelling of the cruel intentions in Louisiana and elsewhere. And then, in less than a month later, on August 13, 2016, all hell breaks loose in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Hundreds riot and loot in a violent mass riot which erupts after police shoot a man to death after he refuses to drop his gun. White motorists are forcibly hauled from their cars on the open freeway and beaten. The mainstream media underreports the story. Then once again, just a month later, riots start up in Charlotte, North Carolina. The National Guard is activated to restore civil order. A black police officer fires upon and kills a black man with a gun who was resisting the police officer's order to put the gun down. The city endures 3 days of unrest and violent riots occurring in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. In a continuing debunking of the Black Lives Matter movement in the fall of 2016, the Wall Street Journal reports The Myth of the Racist Cop. They report on 4 studies out of its 2016 showing that if police are biased, it's in the favor of blacks. Then the metrics of society begin to surface. Although small crimes are still low compared to the violence of the 70s and the 80s, we begin seeing sharp rises in the murder rates in 2015, climbing dramatically in the top 56 urban centers, up 17% over 2014. The trend continues in 2016, with Time reporting murders are up in many U.S. cities again this year. 2016 is even deadlier than 2015. Also, 2016 emerges as one of the worst years on record for the fatal intentional shooting of police officers. Across the country, 60 officers have been shot and killed, 20 of which were by ambushes, a 67% increase over 2015. In 2017, the cultural fabric of Chicago continues to unravel, with the torturing of an 18-year-old special needs white youth by 4 black young teens, 2 men and 2 women, an indication of a rotting society. In April 2017, again we see the decaying of the inner city in Fresno, California, as a black man, exclaiming his hatred for white people, goes on a random shooting spree, killing 3 white men and wounding 2. We need to ask ourselves, why all this civil unrest now? Why did race relations plummet under the Obama presidency? Who's behind the funding of anti-establishment movements, and why? Who's supplying the money? Why is there no real investigative media attention on blacks being killed daily in major cities? Over 4,000 killed in Chicago alone in the last 7.5 years. And the questions go on. Time asked America if we are in a decline. Are we? So let's go through some considerations, looking first at literary. What we see is the continuing pushback against God amongst intellectuals and the professional class. An unrelenting push for relative morality in intellectual circles to the direct risk of our culture. A gradual yet perpetual degrading of our primary institutions' leaders on foundational values. In legal, we see a near collapse in trust of national leaders, a low confidence in Congress, a distrust of state and local leadership, a pulverized electorate in Congress, presidential administration that boldly lied and misled the public with an enabling complicit liberal media. A divided Supreme Court. An inclination to go soft on illegal drugs and criminals, intent to legalize. A president who failed to confront the real priorities of the country and instead is consumed with his legacy and liberal populist issues. A national debt of combined $149.9 trillion. A nation on the brink of bankruptcy, and a biased mainstream media. In Civic, we see worst race relations in decades, rebellious minorities and race hustlers unabated, hate police movements and police murders, riots in major cities, a president that divided instead of unites, quisling local leaders playing to self-interest, murders in major cities up significantly 2 years in a row, media proclaiming U.S. in a decline. The cumulative effect of all of this is a definitive degrading of our culture and weakening of quality moral leadership guiding our nation and peoples. Our next presentation in our Awaken 25 video series continues with our assessment of contemporary society, where we will review the primary institutions of business and industry and their influence upon our culture. Please go to video 6C.